Everybody loves a story, a personal story. It's just kind of that human interest thing that we all tend to respond to very well. So if someone in a relational context at a party or any other place says, hey, you want to hear a story about the time I did this or this thing happened to me, my reaction to that is, tell me your story. I'd love to hear it. Well, let's be very clear about something. It's quite possible to tell your faith story in a terrible way. I mean, in a way that makes people want to run for the doors. And I've been in many settings where people didn't know who I was and they wanted to tell me their faith story. And as I was listening to some folks tell me their faith story, I remember thinking, if I weren't a Christian, I'd become an avowed non-Christian after hearing your story. Stories get derailed in a number of different ways.
Here's the thing. I didn't realize how screwed up I was until I met this guy at the train station. But before I get to that, I've got to give you a little bit about my background.
Almost every faith story that has been told to me has been way longer than it should have been. Sometimes I think my clothing is going to go out of fashion by the time they finish the story.
Even after that, I still had a wild and crazy upbringing. Like, take my school bus rides, for example.
Get to the point. Why did you pursue a faith experience? What happened? What's changed? And mercifully end the story. You know, someone can always ask you a follow-up question.
You know, I met my wife there. Oh, she was a real looker.
Do not oversupply and kill the demand.
I think I've always believed in something, or wanted to believe in something. I think humans have a deep need to believe. You know, there's a longing for significance and meaning. Unlike the animal kingdom, you know, of dogs and apes and gerbils.
Another thing that just drives me crazy is when someone is telling me their faith story and they're not clear. They go on, and I go, in my mind, I say to myself, well, be specific. What did actually happen?
But we've got this spirit force in us that's longing to be tapped and set free.
Shoot straight. Make it clear to me so that when you're done with your story, I kind of know the deal. I know the facts. I know exactly what you went through. If you fuzz around the whole thing, there's really no clarity for me to reckon with after you're done with your story.
This guy comes up and sits right next to me and starts talking to me. I mean, you don't talk to people on the train that you don't know, right?
I pray all the time now. And I pray for friends like you know, whose lives are going nowhere. I pray for understanding, that God will help me know what's wrong with people so that, you know, I can be a lifesaver for them.
If a story starts with any air of superiority, I'm done. I don't want to listen to it.
I'm giving up a storm. Yeah, just ask my kids. They'll say that, you know, I am the primo dad of the universe. Let's ask my church. Ask them who donated the money for the new wing.
If a person starts out saying, well, obviously, you know, I kind of know something that you don't, and I've experienced something that you haven't, and I know the right way and you probably don't. Again, as the listener, I'm done. I don't need you being superior to me, and most people really don't like the feeling of being demeaned or devalued.
Wait, where was I? Oh, yeah, my school bus driver. So, anyway.
Thou shalt also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, a royal diadem in the hand of God. Thou shalt no longer be termed forsaken.
When I hear someone tell a faith story and it's filled with religious terminology, I really wonder if they've thought through the condition of the listener. Does that listener really understand the terms that we get familiar with in religious circles?
Thou shalt be called Hespapah, and thy land Beulah. The Lord delighteth in thee.
I think we have to work much harder to describe our faith story using the kind of terms that everybody uses in regular everyday conversation. Now, it takes discipline to do that. And I often encourage people to actually write out their faith story, word for word, not to commit it to memory, but to expunge the religious jargon from it.
But he says he's gonna buy me a ticket. And who turns down a free ticket, right? So I go, and I had a great time. You know, I mean, there was no drugs, no booze.
You know, somewhere in the Bible it talks about being nice to strangers because you don't know. They could be angels. Oh yeah, that's happened to me.
And whatever you do, do not tell your weird God story when you're communicating your faith story to someone else. I mean, all of us have some bizarre thing that's happened to us that we think maybe God arranged. We saw stars that were aligned in a certain way and saw a cross, or I've heard 100 weird God stories.
I was in Starbucks once talking to a person. I paid my bill, turned around, he was gone. Now that was an angel. Had a huge impact on me. Oh, and our dreams. Oh, I have lots of dreams.
You can tell them in closed session among Christ followers. Okay, don't lead with that card when you're describing your faith to someone who has no faith.
And you've got to pay attention to that because God is speaking to you. He's reaching out to you right in the middle of the night.
It's just bizarre. It's not the central thrust of the Christian message that we're trying to communicate.
So you know what I ended up doing? Flipping burgers at 22 years old. And what the heck am I doing? You know, I used to ask myself that question every night. And what the heck am I doing? Where am I going with my life? What's life about anyway? You know what I mean?
Stop, I've had enough. No more stories like that. Stories can be powerful if they're told right. Stories like that can do more harm than good. We can do better. I think when someone's telling a faith story, what the listener wants to know is, what were you like before your religious experience happened? What kind of led up to that? What was the experience and how did it change you? So it really is kind of the classic before and after. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament, when he was put on trial for being a Christian, for spreading his faith, he just looked at the people in the jury box, if you will, and he said, here's what I was like. Here's the kind of man I was. Prideful and overly aggressive, mean-spirited. I was out to wreck people. I met Jesus Christ in a personal, powerful way. And that old person is gone now. And here's the work that Christ is doing in my life now. And he just silenced the whole court. Before Christ, I'm a new man now. When the opportunity arises for me to tell my story, I just say it very simply. I grew up thinking that I had to perform and achieve and impress a God who I knew I had disappointed. But there was never a sense of when I had done enough, performed enough, achieved enough for God. And then I stumbled into the story of grace. I found out that what Christ did for me on the cross was enough for me to be made right with God. And when I learned that and opened my life up to it, the peace that passes human understanding, I mean, it's hard to describe, came flooding into my life. And I've been living differently, experiencing life differently ever since. A well-told story can be a powerful tool in pointing people to faith. For some people, the story is materialism, greed, money, Christ, then it's generosity, love, serving.
I was all about the next deal. I only bothered with personal relationships when they could further my career. Somehow, though, I got introduced to Jesus Christ and my priorities went haywire. Everything turned upside down, which really surprised my wife and kids. After all these years, I'm finally getting it right.
Did you hear how clear that was? Just before, Christ, after. For some people, it's image, beauty, wanting to be the center of attention. Then it's Christ, and then it's giving of yourself to others and being less wound up in yourself.
A 40-year-old cheerleader isn't all that appealing. It's actually obnoxious, but that's who I'd become. But then a girlfriend of mine took a chance and gave me a book. It was about finding your identity in God. That shattered my whole world and changed all my ideas about what life was really about. It's such a shift for me, but I finally feel like the real me is surfacing.
Brevity. Just saying it and ending it. Let people ask follow-up questions, but, be brief. For other people, it's like hatred and internal firestorm of anxiety and all of that. Christ, and then love of another kind.
I was angry at everything, everybody, including God. The way I figured it, the world owed me big time, and I wasn't getting my due. After finding Christ, though, an amazing thing happened. My new Christian friends showed me real love and compassion, and for the first time, I was able to be real with people.
Humility. It just disarms people. The genuineness of a story told from the heart. Who can argue with that? But whatever it is, you gotta relive what really happened to you. What was leading up to the faith experience, and how are you different on the other side?